So I had all these incredibly beautiful young people send me these very disturbing videos of them sounding like they're being tortured, and if my laptop got confiscated by the cops, I might have been in some very, very bad trouble because I'm into some clearly very dodgy stuff, which in a way I guess I kinda am. I'm fascinated by the idea that our instincts can deceive us. As young kids, we're naturally and instinctively afraid of the dark. I sure was. I remember putting my hand on the light switch and getting ready, and then as I tripped the switch, I would jump right into my bed, pulling the covers all the way over my head because for some reason, if I couldn't see the monster, it couldn't see me. And then once I was in bed, I would start peeking out at the world around me. In the dark, the skateboard would become the spine of a werewolf or a monster, or the most basic and pedestrian things took on dark and ominous and threatening shapes. This fear of the dark never quite leaves us. Bad things happening in the dark, and bad things needing the dark to happen. And yet, in my experience, everything, or nearly everything, that is hidden in this world is hidden in plain sight. You watch a documentary or a newscast about a serial killer, and invariably someone's up there saying, well, he was just so normal looking. There was nothing strange about him. He was kind of quiet. He kept to himself. But he was nice enough. Now, on the one hand, that could be very deliberate camouflage. A killer does his best to fit in, to not stand out in any way, to move about undisturbed. But human psychology also plays a role. We simply accept the evidence of our senses. Our minds filter out most information because otherwise we would always be overwhelmed. We don't see the killer because the killer hides. But we also don't see the killer because we don't want to see. We don't want to know. And so we don't. A similar principle applies when you think of people who live in New York, say. They never go to the Statue of Liberty. The Statue of Liberty is for tourists and for visitors. But for natives to the city, it's always there. It's in the skyline. It's kind of taken for granted. It's always there, and so you stop seeing it because it kind of fades into the background. It remains very much visible, but it conceptually, intellectually, disappears. We walk around cities and we simply ignore what doesn't please us. We don't see the trash cans, even though trash cans are everywhere. We don't see condemned buildings or graffiti because we kind of gloss over it and continue on with our day. It's there, it's clearly visible, but it's also invisible at the same time. We even learn to do that with people. We look through people or past people or over people. We don't notice the rough sleeper or the old man. This was the basic idea for Invisibles, this hidden in plain sight thing. Most things we don't notice, so most things are invisible to us. And when we do happen to notice, we put our own assumptions onto it. We accept the misleading cues of our senses and our prejudices. We don't look at the world and make up our minds. We make up our minds and then we look at the world. But a short film structurally is so short and so unique that you can't think of it as a traditional kind of 3-act structure story. The best way I feel to look at a short film is to think of it as a joke. A joke is actually the perfect structure for a short film. It's a quick thing. It delivers a single punch, a single payload, one or two, no more than that, because then it gets confusing. And to be internally coherent, it has to be kind of concise and it has to be self-contained. So what you do is you have a setup and you have a build, and then you have your punchline or your payoff, and then it's over. You get in and you get out. So I had the idea of this man that you see and you think he's one thing, or you assume certain things about him, but it turns out to be something else. And I wanted to tell this story without words and reams of dialogue. And I wanted to show this very desolate, decaying kind of world that he inhabits. And so, yeah, as my very first short film, I had a single word of dialogue written. I figured it might as well be this one. For the film to work, everything needs to work together perfectly. And so for one of these critical points is the performance. You need actors that can pull it off believably and authentically. I needed really, really, really good actors. The problem, especially with Invisibles, was that it's very easy to act something if you've got reams and reams of dialogue to hide behind. You know, you can deliver a breathtaking performance if you're using some beautiful poetry that's written by some hack, you know, some little speech that you can use as a crutch. But to be able to capture attention and keep it when there's not much being said, when on the surface there's not much happening, that requires a whole different level of talent. I found my bad guy, my heavy, first because I needed that character to be able to do the film at all. I needed someone who could do that. I met him at a social gathering, and he was completely the opposite of the character he would play. I needed someone who could go from this invisible gray man that you don't quite see, that kind of flies under the radar, to somebody who is really, really creepy, and somebody who is someone who can freak you out, really send creepiness up and down your spine. It's a main role and a crucial role, but it's not a speaking role. And to do this, I happened to pick the nicest man in England officially. And he's so very, very different from this character he's playing, because he's neither invisible nor creepy. Try him, take a risk. He's never done any screen acting before. But I'm very glad I found him, because Stephen pulled it off fantastically. He did not disappoint at all, and it was a very difficult role to play. But he certainly had moments that he seeing him on screen deliver. establishing him in my head as this dark kind of character, and the truth is just really, really sweet and nice and full of personality. So I'm amazed and I'm grateful that he said yes. And if he didn't say yes, I couldn't have made this film. So I'm very grateful to him. And then there was River. What he managed to do, even on his audition tape, was so perfect and spot on. I was blown away by the delivery of his scene, and so was everyone else in the room. It was just fantastic. So he's an incredibly wise young man, and he's advanced way beyond his years. I think he's a human being of immense depth and compassion, and he delivered so perfectly and throughout remained incredibly professional and kind of helped to keep it light as well on set, so that no one felt too traumatized by what we were filming, and that was fantastic. Then I also needed my wolf pack of bullies. My wolf pack again, non-speaking, except for my one-word wonder. They were just a quick appearance, but I didn't need serious actors all around because I needed them to exude, not only individually but collectively, this antisocial sense, this out of control feral pack of youths. There's this permissive society that they grow up in. Parents are too busy watching TV, and they're kind of on their own out there in the world. But then they turn aggressive, and they turn as cynical and as dark, nihilistic as the society that carelessly puts them in there. So I needed that sense to be there. I needed them to operate as a pack, but individually to make them scared. And I was amazed at all three actors here. The city scenes were really awesome for me. I worked with Fionn Crow, the director of photography, who has an uncanny ability to see a shot, frame it very quickly. He picks up on what exactly would look almost painting-like. He's got such an eye, and an instinct for it, a gut feel for it. We shot the city scenes like canvases. The sense of desolation and isolation, a kind of a gritty, urban, forlorn, unmaintained, neglected frame through which my grey man, my Iceman, could move. I wanted cool tones applied to the grade. I wanted the camera still locked off, almost like we're observing the world in a cold, clinical, detached sort of way throughout. And I feel these urban scenes, these signs of urban decay, really creates a sense of the world that this monster and his victims inhabit. For our little store, we were very lucky with Reese and his store in Marazion. He's not an actor. He's actually the owner. He's the actual owner and the shopkeeper of the store. And of course, his shop has everything you might need if you ever spend time in a delightful Cornish seaside town. He's very friendly and helpful and personable. Again, he's the very opposite of the dismissive way in which he treated our Iceman. So he's not a professional actor. And that's always a risk, because you've got the risk that non-professionals overact. They do too much. And what we needed here was someone to treat our grey man, our Iceman, almost with a kind of contemptuous kind of dismissiveness. And he did deliver that so fantastically, even though it's the complete opposite of what he's like as a human being. So it was fantastic to have him on board and for the use of his store at Trevenna's stores in Marazion. And he's fantastic. So very grateful for him. We filmed our Wolfpack in a residential area. We needed a kind of a funnel through which they can process their prey. And I have to thank the local people in that area who very graciously welcomed us to their neighborhood. It was a very windy day. There was a lot going on. I'm sure we were under the feet of a lot of the residents, but I'm very grateful for them, and everybody just once they heard what we were doing, they were very gracious and kind and welcoming to us. So we'd like to thank the community for letting us film that. The most important scene, of course, was our Iceman's house. So here we had the exact opposite of the urban decay scenes. We needed it to be warmer looking, interesting but subtle light, which was provided, of course, by our light whiz, talented young filmmaker Sam Melvin, who we were very grateful to sign up to the project as well. I could not have scripted a more perfect place. The floorboards, the pillars, the walls, little elements throughout. It was as if the place had its own character, as if it was a character in the film. It suited the needs of our villain. It was the kind of place that could make you feel like a victim if you were locked in alone at night. So John found it in the beautiful village of Porthleven, and it was a truly fantastic space. We had the cast, the makeup, and the crew downstairs while we were filming upstairs, and it was the perfect canvas from where our Iceman could really warm things up. In case I didn't mention it yet, I was incredibly lucky with every single person that worked on this film. Everybody really brought their A game. I was particularly lucky to have found Elizabeth Brunning. She had a very small budget and very little time, and she had to create prosthetics that would sell. This had to look real. And then she sent me this little prosthetics package in the mail, and she wrapped it up tightly as if she was sending a care package to a soldier on the front lines. And then I received this package at home, and I opened it up, and inside there was just mind-blowing special effects. Again, if the cops raided my house, they would have taken me in for questioning. Now, they would have sent that finger off for testing, and it would obviously come back that it was just, made of prosthetics, plastic. But they would question me for a few hours because it looks real. And not only does it look real, it feels real. It feels real to the touch. You can see little veins underneath the skin. The detail that Elizabeth put into this finger is just mind-blowing. And then, of course, the wounds that you would see on River's shoulder was so realistic. It's incredibly detailed work. And Elizabeth created that, and she really went above and beyond, and I'm incredibly grateful to her. The makeup was phenomenal. So we had three different kinds of blood: the older, the gooey, and the arterial. A nice mix. And this was, it's nice to have the right tools and the right stuff. But in order for it to work and to fly, it needs to be applied with true artistry. Um, and so we had a fantastic makeup crew: Susie, Winter, Abby Cooper, and Joe was just phenomenal. Joe Dodman. They took care of River all day. His scenes were only shot at the end of the day. He must have been freezing. Um, but they were there and they made sure that he looked good and he was ready for it. We had this barbed wire prop. It's made of leather, but it looks like it's eating into flesh. It's just fantastic. And they applied that, and you could see the old wounds and the new wounds. They did one absolutely phenomenal job. Any single aspect of the film can sink the others if it doesn't work. If the performances aren't good, the film doesn't work. If the special effects isn't good, the film doesn't work. In order for the film to work, everything needs to work. There's this old Dolly Parton quote. She once said, it costs a lot of money to look this cheap. Well, when it comes to movies, it takes a very, very, very large amount of fakery and illusion and trickery to create a sense of realism. And everybody on the team did just that, and we have a fantastic, fantastic end result. The very first day we were supposed to shoot, we rained out. So secretly, of course, you know, you really worry about things like that. It's one of those, tales you hear about when things just keep going wrong. So when we rained out, I was very worried that it was an omen of things going wrong throughout, but that's not what happened. We rained out, but then things started going right, and the reason things went right very very much due to Fionn Crow, our director of photography. Again, another lucky break was getting him. This guy uses a camera like it's part of his body. He has to, because he's usually filming in places like Rwanda, or he's running away from hippos in Gambia, or he's hiking for miles and miles on stretches of beach. A DOP must have a great eye, but a great DOP has great hands as well. He knows not just how to point a camera, but he knows how to make it sing. He plays it like an instrument. Fionn knows how to frame things, but he also knows how to place them within depth of field. He knows how to stick to the rules when the Iceman is out and about, because the Iceman sticks to rules. But then he also knows how to get weird and fuzzy when we're inside the House of Hell. His background is that of a documentary filmmaker. And I like that about him, that he could bring that kind of realism to it. The light was a whole other trick. We had this giant gaping window open, letting in delightful natural light, but we still wanted to sculpt the light softly, and specifically inside the House of Hell, we wanted to play with the interplay of light and shadow. So the idea was to have a crazy person sitting inside his own head, where the shadows play as if they are thoughts in his mind. So this contrast between the darkness and the light, that's what created the power of the scenes in there. So we drew on chiaroscuro, the Renaissance painting technique that the German Impressionists used in their cinema. But we were drawing more on the Renaissance painting kind of effects. There's certainly some hints of Saint Sebastian and some of what we did, and there's certainly the sense of the old man sitting there, having these hellish thoughts, and what's going through his head there. Sam Melvin took on the challenge and he entered the fog of war, and he gave us something at once powerful and subtle. This was not an easy film to light. We didn't want to go too crazy with it, yet we didn't want to be too bare about it either. So we had to strike exactly the right balance, and Sam Melvin managed to do that for us. So we're grateful to him. There's a lot of moving parts to a film. Everybody has to be happy and healthy. There's a lot of logistics. There's a lot of there's the business end of things, there's the creative end of things, and there's the technical end of things. And all three have to be perfectly balanced to really get the work you want. And then something amazing happens, something truly magical. You get to experience your own story firsthand. And that's amazing, because all you did was write it. All these amazing people bring their own talent and their own insights and their own experience and their own passion into the project. So you have all these pros and you set up the shot, but then I very much like to work very closely with the actors and get all deep and meaningful and Stanislavski with them. So we do go places, we go harsh places. Stephen, one of the nicest, kindest, sweetest, most harmless and fun human beings I've ever met, and now I suddenly need him to creep me out. So we need to summon and evoke and then beam, broadcast this creepy as hell, perverse creature that would make your skin crawl and haunt your nightmares. And he did this fantastically. And then I would have to say that with River's performance, no one was prepared for it, least of all me. I made it clear that those who wanted to be in the room could be there, but if you decided to stay, you had to stay for the whole ride. And of course, that filled up the room. So we had everyone there for River's performance. We only had one guy outside in case somebody walked past and thought he needed to save the poor guy. And the thing with, when you're on set, you're on schedule, there's a lot happening. So the moment you say cut, stuff starts happening and moving, and people start, setting up the next shot and moving on. And River did his performance, and I said cut, and there was 2 minutes of silence because he just put us through. I wanted it to be disturbing and unsettling. It's obviously a slow build. There's no jump scares. And we don't rely on violence or gore. There's a little bit of gross, but it's not about the gross, and it's not about the violence either. You hear things, but truth is what you don't see. And what your own mind can produce is, of course, always far worse than whatever some filmmaker can put on a screen.
No. No, 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 no!
The soul can handle anything. River taught me that. I mean, where the hell do you get that? To deliver like that? Because I've been playing around the darkest reaches of the human psyche for decades. And I don't know. A lot of ingredients go into a dish. You have to take your choice cuts, so to speak. The locations, the actors, the story, the light, the camera, the sounds. You get the footage, you capture the sights, the sounds, and then you stay true to the traditional recipe, the big idea, the concept. It's like your favorite memory of how grandma used to make it. That kind of is your guiding light. That kind of guides you through the process. But once you've gathered all the ingredients together, then you actually have to cook the son of a bitch, and that's in the method. If a movie was a dish, post is how you actually make it. It's the part where all the various ingredients are brought together in just the right quantities. You take bland, washed out log footage and you bring out the natural colors like flavors, and then you complement that with a secret blend of herbs and spices to take it from tasty to actually delicious. It goes from what's in the pot to what is presented. So the grading was done to the exterior scenes. We graded that to be cold and harsh and clinical. Whenever our Iceman walked around outside, he was in an unforgiving environment. Inside his own house, the house of horrors, this was the madman's playground. The grade is much warmer. We wanted him to be a lot more comfortable in it, to play his little games, and he feels safe at least inside that. So that was the grade. Then, of course, there's the sound effects and the music, and what we did there, we wanted the visuals to be ultra realistic, but at the same time we wanted the sense that something's not quite right, something's quite off. So we went with quite dreamlike qualities to the sound. We went a little in contrast almost to the visuals. There's bits and pieces where the sounds and the visuals don't quite match up. It is to create that sense of unsettled sense in the viewers. And then we were very lucky, of course, to have the scoring talents of Kyle McKeeston, Sana on the Dijkstra on the edits, and Ari Golani, people we've always worked together, and Privateer we're quite lucky to have a tight-knit group like this. I do this because I love nothing more than telling stories. It's not the money or being a star or being a prima donna auteur, none of that crap. It's about stories, the kind I liked as a kid, the kind I escaped into whenever I got the chance, back on VHS back in the day, or in movie theaters, or in print. And to this day, streaming, however I get it, I love stories. And I love the audience, and I want them to enjoy the ride, to get a thrill, to get scared, to be outraged, to be shocked, to feel warm and fuzzy, to burst out laughing, to be dizzy with love, to be soppy with sentimentality. I want the tension, the frights, the awe, the wonder, the amazement, the wow. That's why I do this. That's why I love this. That's what I want. I want to create wow. There's a lot of bullshit around this industry. Too many accountants are wagging the creative departments. There's too much risk aversion and an unwillingness to experiment by the incumbents. That's why they rather make yet another version of the same plot over and over. They actually teach in their textbooks that all the stories have already been told, and what's worse, they actually believe that. There's no faith in the audience, there's no respect for them either. And the budgets are so high and the stakes are so high that no one can afford to try something new, because any failure might be catastrophic. And yet, perhaps the world is starting to learn that simply making Superhero Man 972 isn't necessarily a recipe for success. You've got to take a chance, you've got to take a risk. Money's good, don't get me wrong, a reward for our effort. I like to pay the actors early and well. My producer John and his team were remarkably patient and accommodating to ensure that all the young people get paid and they get their dough and they can earn their living practicing their art. And we want to make many, many movies, so it has to be sustainable. I want things to run tightly and smartly and on sound principles, without debt, without predators, and without executives calling the shots. I like stories, horror and sci-fi specifically, and I have more stories in my head than I know I can ever tell. But you have to be willing to fail. You have to be willing to bring out things where some things work better than others, and some things don't work for everybody, and some things work only for small audiences, and some things work better for big audiences. But you've got to do that rather than just repeating the same tired old recipes. I have a rule. It hangs above and behind my desk at Privateer, so I can see it and everyone there can see it, because I mean it. It says this: I will never make the same movie twice. What's next? All kinds of dark shit. I can tell you, but then I might just have to kill you.